Hello everyone. Today, exploring NIO stock and dissecting crucial FOMC minutes impact on markets, analyzing China's macroeconomics, NIO's downturn, and potential rate hikes, assessing market sentiment, stock patterns, and China's influence, emphasizing uncertainty and cautious observation, what's going on with NIO stock, and break down some other important aspects of the FOMC minutes. I'm going to talk about how this has affected the markets and how this may affect us as well moving forward. And some very important things about tomorrow as we have some interesting technicals developing on NIO. Now before I break anything down about what's going on with NIO, Tesla SPY, and the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there, NIO is down 3.63% for the day again, as the whole market ended up getting this rug pull to end the day. On top of this, NIO has another issue that has to do with the macroeconomic factors of China, as we're going to discuss to the more and more negative effects affecting the entire economy there. Now with the banking issues emerging over there and not to mention other concerns about recessionary fears, the lack of demand and factors like that, we're starting to discuss a lot of Chinese tickers taking some hits. Just observing NIO, the overall price action is still suggesting that the share price is quite weak. We're trying to hold support at $11, but if it breaks we have the next imbalance below in the mid-10 that could be tested, but it's crucial to carefully monitor whether our actions lead to additional issues. Now, as of right now, although it looks more bearish, I want to talk about the FOMC mints, how this is affecting the whole market and NIO. Then I'm going to talk about other important factors. But right now, as the mints came out, the Fed officials are perceiving another risk of inflation increasing once more, and they are inclining towards implementing additional rate hikes. This is what the majority of them ended up saying, and they're talking about this because of the fact that core CPI or core PPI, and not to mention PCE, which is core, they all have a tendency of being relatively high. Now just analyzing the present data, it's quite clear that gas prices are starting to go up, and energy going up has a big effect on other sectors with all of this going on, and the Fed inciting fear into the markets like this. This led to a sell-off near the end of the day today. But remember, these sell-offs are not always that natural. They're not always guaranteed to continue for many days in a row, because what sometimes happens is the market sells off after a big event like this out of the initial fear. Then it starts to curl back up the next day. Or it could just continue to sink lower if there's more negative news the next day about this, if there's more fear being incited by the media, and etc. So it all depends on the real reaction, which could actually happen after the next day. And for now, we're going to be discussing how does the market respond to this? Does the market start pricing in another rate hike in September? Or are they going to continue to just wait it out? We simply need to wait and observe beginning tomorrow. One thing that's a little bit different is the fear and greed index went from being very greedy to neutral, and it's becoming more fearful as the days go on. And it used to be a lot more greedy before market momentum is becoming less greedy. Same thing with the current stock price index is dropping from extremely greedy to just greedy and becoming more neutral. And then on top of this, the McCullen Volume Summation Index is becoming way less greedy than before, observing this continuing to drop. And finally, the put and call options are becoming more fearful in terms of their positioning. The market is becoming less and less bullish and becoming a lot more fearful. The VX, or market volatility, still reflects the same thing. It's holding above its 50 and it's continuing to hold up nicely as extreme fear is once again emerging. So this is once again not the best of signs for the market, as the market was very greedy for a very, very long time. And a pullback like this is long overdue. But the question is, how will the market respond tomorrow, right? What could end up affecting it for earnings? We don't have anything too big. We have Walmart and then a couple of others, like due announcing earnings. Walmart's gonna be a big one. We're gonna find out what happens with their guidance, because Target had its guidance actually cut today, despite the fact that they actually beat on earnings. So that's going to be very interesting. We're going to wait for Walmart's tomorrow morning, and that's basically it for the majority of the week. We have Ross after the market closes on Thursday, and that's about it for retail for data. There's nothing really too big coming out except for initial jobless claims, so lots of jobs numbers are coming out for tomorrow. We're going to find out what this looks like. This will have a big effect on the market tomorrow morning, and if this is way too hot, the market would actually like that, as the Fed is going to be de-incentivized to be hawkish. If this is very, very low, the market may not actually like that. We have to be very careful here because the Fed is talking about how the current employment numbers are too hot and they are leading to a risk of high inflation. Now, in my opinion, you can't solely just look at unemployment or spending. There are many other factors that will dictate inflation, such as supply chains, not to mention how other countries and their central banks are performing, not to mention our current changes to monetary policy. All these things are going to play a big role too. Could you argue that the jobs numbers play a role? I mean, yes, but that's not the biggest factor. It's not the only factor, in my opinion. And I think that the Fed is not just after inflation at this point, but they're also after a reset that's going to be very important for businesses. I think that's what the Fed is also after. Therefore, we will be closely observing these aspects as we approach tomorrow. NIO's volume is dropping, so we're actually not selling off as aggressively, which is a decent sign that NIO was getting closer to support. 59 million was the volume. Shifting attention to the overall data, the short volume still dropping, so it's not that bad. The price was dropping. NIO is losing relative strength. I didn't come across any significant developments in relation to it, by the way, but the current news involving China cutting rates and the economic hardships for the banking sectors, the fear of contagion, not to mention the lack of demand over there and them not really meeting all expectations in terms of their overall imports and exports data. That's all leading the direction of downside for the Chinese sector, downside for many Chinese stocks. And that's part of why NIO has been dropping. NIO is not doing anything wrong fundamentally. NIO is not doing horrible. NIO is not announcing bad numbers right now. It is dropping because of the market and also because of news involving China. That is like an external factor that's outside of NIO's control. It's not NIO's fault, and there's going to be a very nice recovery eventually. But I just want to make it clear that when this happens to any company, if this happened to the USA, these things happen to the US. Tesla would also be sinking. Tesla's already sinking, but Tesla has not announced anything too bad. It's just that the whole market moves on a similar algorithm, and we have external factors affecting these stocks. On Thursdays, NIO was only green. It's about 50.68% of the time. Almost 50-50, something too crazy. I'd also like to mention that it's common to witness higher volatility around the 5th and 7th hours of the trading day. And finally, the short interest is starting to go up. We saw about 14.5 million NIO shares being shorted just a couple of days ago. As we're witnessing a recent increase in shorting activity, it's worth considering how this trend might impact NIO. Considering the chart's information, it's continuing to downtrend. It hasn't really based just yet, but I just want to mention that the 4-hour is also looking bearish. It's also still looking kind of weak, and it looks like this thing is getting very close to this imbalance down here and wants to base around here. Anticipating a potential upward movement tomorrow morning, followed by an expected decline to approximately 10.6 to 10.7, focusing on the observed imbalance in this range. Then make attempt to bounce and close a little bit in the red. I'm still leaning a little bit more in that direction for NIO, and I still think that the overall Chinese sentiment and the news affecting China is having a big effect on the company. Shifting our attention to SPY, the current outlook presents some variations. SPY came down pretty hard after the news came out that the Fed is still open to raising rates, and from a technical standpoint it does look a little bit more bearish. However, I won't be relying solely on technicals, as it's important to monitor specific levels as well. What do I mean by that? Well, the market got an initial sell-off from the initial reaction after the FOMC minutes. Okay, that does not mean we have to keep selling tomorrow and for Friday. That's not a guarantee because sometimes there's trickery. Sometimes unexpected moves could come. Sometimes the market could feel like it dropped too much. There's too much selling, and the market makers could try to cause the opposite to happen. So for tomorrow, if SPY manages to maintain its position above 440, if that actually ends up holding, there is potential for it to make its way back up to 442 plus, or even higher levels to 444. If it fails to hold 440 during our retest, okay, because I think it's going to retest this. If it gets a rejection, it comes down to 439.39. Test the low right here. If that breaks and there's bad news that comes out that causes the market to break, then there's a possibility that it could decline to approximately 437, then more downside. We should remain attentive and await confirmation tomorrow morning, adopting a cautious stance, because with these FOMC events, sometimes the first move is not the real move. You have to be very careful for Tesla. It's going to translate very similar to SPY. If we get a bounce tomorrow, right, you'll be carefully observing to witness the test around the significant 230 level. If Tesla can get it back above 225 and then push up for about 230 and hold above 230, it does have potential to hold up quite nicely. It could make an attempt to hold 230, but if it hits 230, rejects, and ends up failing, then Tesla could start thinking a lot lower, and Tesla come all the way down to 221. If that fails us, there's like 217 to 215. Tesla will more downside if it ends up breaking and failing to hold 230, and if it breaks below 225 again. So 225 is also going to be important. If it ends up failing, let's just say it tests like 230, then rejects. 225 is going to be key if that fails us. If it keeps failing to hold 225, it is going to sink all the way down to the very low 220 in my opinion. It's going to look weak. Therefore, it would be wise to be alert for that test tomorrow. That does seem more probable, but just to be safe, confirmation is something we must keep an eye out for. Last but not least, for the QQQ, before I talk about NIO, observe for retest of 364. If it could hold above 364, there's a possibility that we could observe a rise towards approximately 366. Nevertheless, the crucial point of interest is at 364. Should 364 face rejection and an inability to sustain its position, leading to a subsequent decline that breaches the 362 low, there's a potential for it to decline significantly to 360. And if that fails, this 357 is on the table for this distributive structure to play out. Okay, so we're going to be observing for the test. I'm not 100% sure which way it's going to go for now. We simply need to wait and observe tomorrow to gauge the reaction. After the FOMC minutes, the initial reaction has been bearish, but will if the market tries to base or balance, or if we try to get an opposite reaction tomorrow. Because sometimes that happens. Sometimes the market is tricky, so you have to be open-minded, so I hope this is as clear as possible for NIO. We're going to be discussing tomorrow kind of like a bounce in the morning, then a retest of like 11.5 or so. Then rejection, I think it's going to come down to 10.7 to 10.6. That's where we have this imbalance down here. It may be acting as a magnet for NIO, dragging it down before NIO makes an attempt to bounce and then end up closing a little bit in the red. The possibility of a red closing remains, with a potential for a slight rebound later in the day, but still a red close around 11 flats, and I think that's where NIO is going to try to base very, very soon. So that's where I'm leaning towards from a technical standpoint. But just to be safe, if NIO breaks this low, it breaks below 11.8, it's going to most likely come down to 10.7. If it manages to hold above 11, it starts pushing back up. If it holds above like 11.4 or so, it's possible that we might witness a retest around 11.8 for this thing in the future. But like I said before, I'm not leaning in that direction. The trend looks more bearish from a technical standpoint, and because of all this negative news involving China, the OBS do favor maybe a little pop and a drop, and then another red close for NIO for tomorrow. That's more probable based off technical analysis and the negative news. It's not NIO's fault, but it is what it is. The best thing we can do is be unbiased. All right, so thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more stock predictions and market insights. Remember to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Happy investing and see you in the next video.